The soccer field was alive with noise that Saturday morning. The sun was high, the grass bright green, and the air carried the smell of cut turf mixed with the sound of whistles and cheering. Parents crowded the benches on both sides, waving banners, clapping loudly, and shouting encouragement to their kids. Children ran across the field in bright uniforms, their shoes smacking against the ground as they chased the ball with everything they had. Coaches barked orders, whistles blew, and the game unfolded in front of the crowd like any normal weekend match. But then, something unusual happened. Something that no one there would ever forget. A figure stepped onto the field. He wasn't wearing a jersey or cleats. He wasn't a referee. He wasn't part of the game at all. It was a dad, an older man, taller than most of the parents, with strong shoulders and rough hands that looked like they had done years of hard work. His boots were scuffed, not meant for sports, and his shirt was plain and faded, almost out of place against the colorful jerseys and fancy sports gear surrounding him. He walked slowly, not rushed, not apologizing, not even glancing at the coach who was waving his arms in confusion. His steps were firm, but there was something awkward about the way he moved, like he didn't belong here at all. At first, the crowd didn't understand what they were seeing. A few parents blinked, nudged each other, and whispered. Then the laughter started, low at first, then louder, until it rolled across the benches. Kids on the sidelines snickered and pointed. One man in a polo shirt leaned forward, shaking his head and saying, "What's he doing out there? Does he even know the rules?" Another parent shouted out from the bleachers, his voice dripping with mockery, "Hey, old man, leave it to the players." The man did not react. He didn't look embarrassed, didn't shuffle off the field in shame like they expected. Instead, he stood still, calm, his eyes scanning the grass, the goals, the kids running back and forth, as if he was seeing something the others couldn't. He didn't cheer. He didn't explain. He didn't even look at the people who were laughing at him. His face was quiet, his jaw set, and his gaze steady. The crowd only grew louder. A few pulled out their phones, raising them high to record the strange sight. They wanted to capture the moment, to laugh about it later, to post it online with mocking captions. They thought it was hilarious. An out-of-place dad wandering onto a kid's soccer field, acting as though he had some important role. Some even joked loudly. Maybe he thinks he's the new coach, and the laughter echoed again, bouncing from one side of the field to the other. But what no one understood, not the parents, not the coaches, not even most of the kids, was that this dad wasn't there to play, and he wasn't there by mistake. He wasn't lost, and he wasn't confused. He was waiting for something no one else expected, something that would turn that laughter into stunned silence. His son, a small boy sitting nervously on the bench with the other substitutes, saw everything. He recognized the stillness in his father's posture. He knew that expression, the one that looked calm on the outside but carried a storm of focus within. The boy shifted uncomfortably, biting his lip, glancing at the other kids who were now teasing him. "Is that your dad?" one of them whispered, giggling. "Why is he just standing there like a weirdo?" The boy lowered his head, his cheeks burning, but deep down, he understood something none of the others did. His father didn't do anything without a reason. The referee blew the whistle again, signaling the game to continue, but even as the children rushed after the ball, most eyes stayed locked on the man standing so still in the middle of the field. Coaches shouted for him to leave, waving their arms angrily, but he didn't budge. One coach even jogged halfway across the grass, calling out, "Sir, please, step off. You're interrupting the game." But the man didn't move. He didn't argue. He didn't even acknowledge the words. He just stood there, shoulders squared, eyes fixed, calm and steady as though he were guarding something invisible. The laughter, though still loud, now carried a sharper edge. People were confused, annoyed, even uneasy. A few muttered, "What's wrong with him?" while others laughed harder to hide their discomfort. Still, the dad didn't flinch. He looked once toward the sky, lifting his chin slightly as though checking the horizon, then lowered his gaze back to the field. The boy on the bench leaned forward, his stomach twisting. He remembered a moment from home, late at night, when he had caught a glimpse of something hidden in his father's drawer, a small, strange device with blinking lights. His father had quickly taken it away, telling him never to touch it, never even to ask about it. The boy hadn't understood then, but now, watching his father stand tall in front of a mocking crowd, he felt the same unease, the same sense that something secret, something important, was about to happen. The crowd laughed louder, thinking they were watching nothing more than an awkward scene. But the boy knew better. His father was waiting for what he didn't know. But the way his father stood, unshaken, calm under the storm of ridicule, told him that whatever it was coming soon. And when it came, none of the laughter would remain. The laughter on the benches grew louder, echoing across the soccer field. The kids who weren't playing leaned forward, pointing and whispering about the man standing motionless on the grass. Some adults shook their heads, pretending to be annoyed, but secretly they enjoyed the scene. To them, this was just entertainment, a clueless dad making a fool of himself in front of the whole crowd. The coach finally lost his patience. Red-faced and embarrassed, he jogged toward the man. "Sir, you can't be here. The game's going on. Please step aside." His voice cracked from both frustration and the effort of shouting over the crowd. But the dad didn't move. He didn't even glance at the coach. His eyes were fixed on something beyond the players, beyond the goals, as though he was watching something invisible. He stood tall, calm, his hands at his sides, and said nothing. The silence from him was strange, almost unsettling. The coach huffed, waving his arms dramatically to get attention. "Folks, I'll handle this. Don't worry." The crowd laughed again, clapping sarcastically. A few parents shouted, "Yeah, get him off the field." And finally, the man's son sat on the bench with the substitutes, his small fists clenching tighter with every second. He could feel his ears burning as the other kids whispered and laughed at him. "That's your dad, right?" one boy teased. "Why's he just standing there like a statue?" Another chimed in. "He doesn't even talk. Is he broken?" The laughter stung, but the boy didn't answer. He kept his eyes locked on his father, his chest tight with both worry and something else, anticipation. He remembered how his father sometimes went quiet at home, staring out the window for long minutes, lost in thought. He remembered the times when his father would tell him to listen, to stay calm, even when nothing seemed wrong. And he remembered the strange black device he had once seen hidden in a drawer, blinking faintly like it was alive. His father had taken it away quickly and told him never to ask about it. At the time, he thought it was just some broken gadget. But now, watching his father stand silent in the middle of the laughter, he realized it might have been something more. The coach reached the man and stepped directly in front of him. "Sir," he barked, his voice sharp. "This is a kid's game. Whatever you're doing, you need to stop right now." The dad finally moved, but only slightly. He turned his head slowly toward the coach. His expression didn't change. His eyes were steady, calm, but there was something in them that made the coach's voice falter. For a brief second, the coach forgot what he was about to say. The man's stare was too intense, too controlled, like he was trained to look through someone, not at them. "Sir," the coach said again, softer now, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The dad said nothing. He simply turned his gaze back to the sky. The silence was heavy. The coach blinked, stepped back once, then looked around nervously as if asking the crowd for support. Parents jeered from the benches. "Kick him out already, and he's ruining the game." The coach swallowed hard, but he didn't try again. Something about the man's stillness unsettled him. On the benches, the laughter continued, but some people had started to shift uncomfortably. The longer the dad stood there without speaking, the stranger the moment became. One mother muttered, "Why isn't he saying anything?" Another whispered, "Is he waiting for someone?" Nervous chuckles spread as people tried to cover their unease with more jokes. But the silence of the man was louder than their laughter. The boy on the bench leaned forward now, his knees bouncing. He wanted to run to his father, to tell everyone to stop mocking him, but his throat felt tight. Deep down, he knew his father didn't need defending. He was waiting for something no one else expected. Then it happened. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. A black device, smooth and unfamiliar, with a faint blinking light. The crowd went dead silent. The laughter stopped instantly, replaced by gasps and nervous whispers. "What is that?" someone said. Is he calling someone?" another asked. "Is that even legal?" muttered a third, gripping their phone tighter. Even the players slowed on the field, the ball rolling to a stop as they stared at the strange object in the man's hand. Coaches shouted at them to focus, but no one could. All eyes were on the dad and the blinking device. The boy's heart thudded in his chest. He recognized it. It was the same thing he had seen hidden in the drawer. He had never asked about it again, but now he understood. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't junk. It was something important, something his father had been keeping for a reason. The dad raised his head, scanning the sky again. His thumb pressed gently against the device, and a faint beep echoed across the field. It was soft, almost too soft to hear, but it carried in the silence like a warning bell. People jumped at the sound. Parents looked at each other nervously. The coach stumbled back, nearly tripping on the grass. "What did he just do?" someone shouted. "Is he calling the police?" another whispered, though their voice shook. The dad finally spoke, his voice deep and steady, cutting through the noise. "You'll want to move back." That was all he said. No explanation. No details. Just those words. For a moment, the crowd stared at him, confused. Then, almost at once, the laughter began again. Only this time it was nervous, forced. "Move back." "From what?" Someone chuckled weakly. Another shouted, "Yeah right, old man. What's gonna happen? A UFO." The boy sat frozen. His father never said things without meaning them. If he was telling people to move back, it wasn't a joke. Something was coming. And just then, as if answering the question, a sound rolled across the horizon. Low, deep, and rumbling. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a plane. It was something heavier. The dad lowered the device and stood taller, his silence now terrifying. Something was in the sky. The rumble in the distance grew louder, rolling across the sky like a giant drumbeat. Parents on the benches turned their heads, squinting toward the horizon. Kids stopped running after the ball, frozen in place. Even the referee lowered his whistle, his eyes narrowing in confusion. But in the middle of the field, the dad stood firm, the strange black device still in his hand. Its tiny light blinked steadily, a soft rhythm that didn't match anything else around. The crowd's nervous chatter filled the silence. "What is that thing?" someone whispered. "Looks like a radio," another replied. No, that's not a radio." "That's military," said an older man, his voice tight. The boy on the bench gripped his knees, so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew that device. He had seen it once when he was younger, hidden in his father's drawer. His father had snapped the drawer shut quickly and told him never to touch it, never to even ask about it. At the time, the boy thought it was just some old gadget, maybe broken. But now, seeing the way his father held it, calm and steady, he realized it was something much more. The coach stood a few feet away, his face pale. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're scaring everyone. Please, put that thing away." The dad turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. He spoke only one sentence, his voice low but firm. "Stay back." The words sent a shiver through the crowd. They didn't know why, but suddenly, the laughter from earlier seemed foolish. Parents pulled their children closer. A few people even stood up from the benches, ready to leave, but something kept them frozen in place. The curiosity, the fear, the sense that whatever was happening, they had to see it through. The rumble in the sky grew louder now, vibrating through the ground. Dust lifted from the field. The kids on the bench covered their ears, their wide eyes locked on the clouds. The boy's heart pounded. He wanted to run to his father, to stand next to him, but his legs wouldn't move. He sat frozen, his chest tight, his eyes watering from the force of the sound. Suddenly, the device in his father's hand gave a sharp double beep. The blinking light turned solid green. The dad's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened and his grip on the device grew firm. He lowered it slowly, sliding it back into his pocket. Then he looked up. The crowd followed his gaze. At first, it looked like nothing but dark clouds shifting in the sky. But then something broke through. A shape, black and massive, moving with power. The sound grew deafening, chopping through the air in heavy, rhythmic bursts. Parents gasped, shielding their eyes from the dust blasting across the field. Children screamed, clutching their ears. And then they saw it. A helicopter. Not a small civilian one, but a massive Navy helicopter, its rotors thundering, its dark body cutting through the sky with purpose. The insignia on its side glinted in the sunlight, unmistakable. It wasn't just flying by, it was headed straight for the field. The parents who had been laughing only moments ago now stood frozen, their faces pale. Phones that had been raised to mock the dad were still recording, but the hands that held them were shaking. Is that for him? Someone whispered.
No way.
That can't be. He's just some random guy, another muttered, though their voice lacked conviction. But deep down, everyone knew. The helicopter slowed as it neared, lowering itself toward the field. The air exploded with wind, sending dirt and grass flying everywhere. People ducked, shielding their faces, holding onto their children. The coaches shouted for the kids to move back, herding them away from the center of the field. But the dad didn't move. He stood tall, unshaken, his shirt whipping in the storm of air. His eyes were locked on the descending machine, his body perfectly still. The boy on the bench couldn't breathe. He felt like his chest was going to burst. All the laughter, all the teasing from before, seemed like a distant memory now. His father wasn't just a quiet, strange man. He wasn't just some dad. He was something else, something far bigger than anyone had imagined. The helicopter hovered above the field, its shadow swallowing everything below. The noise was so loud it shook the benches. People shouted to each other, but their voices were lost in the roar of the blades. And then, a rope dropped from the side of the helicopter, whipping in the air. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Parents covered their mouths. Kids screamed and clung to their mothers. The wind howled, and the sound of the blades hammered into their bones. A soldier slid down the rope with practiced ease, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. He stood tall, straight-backed, his uniform crisp, his eyes sharp. The crowd fell silent again. Every single person stared. No one laughed anymore. The soldier marched straight to the dad, stopping a few feet away. Dust swirled between them. He raised his hand in a sharp salute, his voice booming over the roar of the helicopter. "Commander, your ride is here." The words cracked through the air like lightning. The crowd gasped, parents exchanging stunned looks. A child whispered, "Commander?" "Him." The boy on the bench nearly fell over. His mouth dropped open, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Commander." His dad was a commander. The dad nodded once, calm as ever. No pride, no surprise, just acknowledgement, as though this was routine. The soldier reached into a pouch and pulled out a black folder stamped with a Navy insignia. He handed it to the dad, who took it with steady hands. Then the soldier pulled out a pair of dark sunglasses, pressing them into his palm. The dad slipped them on, turned once toward the benches, and locked eyes with his son. For the first time that day, he smiled. The boy's throat tightened. The laughter of the crowd, the mockery of the other kids, it was all gone now. He didn't care anymore. His father wasn't just his dad. He was something greater. The helicopter roared above, waiting. The soldier stood at attention. The crowd held its breath. And the man who had once been mocked for simply walking onto a soccer field now stood revealed as someone no one dared laugh at again. The helicopter's roar swallowed the soccer field, its blades chopping the air with a force that shook the ground. Parents covered their ears, their hair whipping wildly in the wind. Children screamed and clung to their mothers as dust and bits of grass blasted into their faces. Coaches tried to shield their players, waving their arms to herd them toward safety, but no one could truly look away. The massive Navy machine hung above them like a beast of steel, loud and powerful, impossible to ignore. And yet, in the middle of the storm, the dad stood completely still. He didn't duck. He didn't flinch. He didn't shield his eyes like everyone else. His shirt whipped violently against his body, but his face stayed calm, unreadable, as if he had been here before, as if this chaos was normal to him. The soldier, who had slid down the rope, stood firmly by his side. His boots pressed into the grass, his eyes scanning the crowd with sharp precision, like he was trained to find threats even here at a children's game. The man's presence alone silenced the benches. No one dared shout anymore. No one dared laugh. Parents clutched their phones, still recording but no longer smirking. Their hands shook, their voices caught in their throats. A few lowered their phones completely, ashamed that they had mocked this man only minutes ago. Some glanced at each other with wide, questioning eyes. Was this real? Was the helicopter truly here for him? The boy on the bench stared with his mouth open, his heart hammering in his chest. His father had always been quiet, ordinary to everyone else. Just a man who went to work, came home tired, and helped with homework in the evenings. Nobody at school knew anything different. He never bragged, never showed off, never told stories. But here, in front of everyone, the truth was unfolding. The soldier's words still rang in his ears. "Commander, your ride is here." The boy's hands shook, but his chest swelled with something he had never felt before: pride. His dad wasn't just dad. He wasn't just the man people mocked for being quiet or wearing plain clothes. He was something bigger, something stronger. And now the whole world could see it. The helicopter lowered slightly, its shadow stretching across the field. Grass flattened under the force of the air. People staggered back, covering their faces, coughing through the dust. The referee stumbled and grabbed the goalpost to steady himself. The kids who had laughed earlier now stared with wide, fearful eyes, no jokes left on their tongues. Is this real?" a mother whispered, clutching her daughter tightly. "That man's military," another replied shakily. "He has to be." But why here? Why now? No one had an answer. The coach who had tried to push the dad off the field earlier now stood frozen, his whistle dangling uselessly from his hand. His face burned red with shame, his eyes darting nervously between the soldier and the man he had mocked. He opened his mouth as if to apologize, but no sound came out. He stayed quiet, swallowing his words. The dad finally turned his head, looking briefly at the crowd. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but his posture spoke clearly. He wasn't angry. He wasn't gloating. He was simply steady, calm, untouchable. He didn't need to explain himself. The truth spoke louder than words. He was someone important, someone powerful, someone trusted enough that the Navy itself had come for him. The boy stood now, his legs shaking. He couldn't stay on the bench anymore. His heart pushed him forward, step by shaky step, until he was at the edge of the field, the wind from the helicopter slamming against his small body. His father glanced at him. For a brief second, amidst the noise and chaos, their eyes met. And in that silent look, the boy understood everything. His father wasn't abandoning him. He wasn't embarrassed. He was answering a call bigger than himself. The soldier stepped closer to the dad, raising his voice to be heard over the roar. "Sir, we're running low on time. The mission is critical. We need to leave immediately." The crowd gasped. A mission? A real mission? Their earlier laughter seemed like a cruel memory now. Parents held their children tighter, unsure if they were safe just standing near this man. Some even backed away slowly, their fear mixing with awe. The dad gave a small nod. He spoke calmly, but his words carried through the storm. "Understood." He bent down slightly and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The boy's throat tightened. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, wanted to beg his father not to go, but his voice broke before he could speak. His father leaned close, his words meant only for him. "Be strong. I'll be back." The boy's eyes filled with tears. He gripped his father's hand tightly, refusing to let go. But the soldier placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him. "He'll be all right," the soldier said, his tone surprisingly gentle. "Your father knows what he's doing." The boy nodded slowly, his lip trembling, but deep down he believed it. His father wasn't afraid, So why should he be? The rope swayed again, swinging in the storm of the blades. The soldier signaled. Time to move, Commander. The dad squeezed his son's shoulder one last time, then stood tall. He grasped the rope with steady hands, his movements strong and practiced. Without hesitation, he began to climb, the soldier following right behind him. The crowd could only watch. Phones shook, eyes watered from the wind, but no one dared move closer. The dad's figure rose higher, swallowed by the machine above. The helicopter thundered louder, blades cutting through the sky. Dust exploded in every direction. The sound was deafening, shaking the very earth. And then, as the man disappeared inside the helicopter, something changed. The laughter, the mocking, the taunts, all of it was gone. In its place was silence. A stunned, heavy silence that covered the whole field. Because everyone now knew they hadn't just mocked a father. They had mocked a commander. And as the helicopter began to rise, carrying him away, the crowd realized they had witnessed something they would never forget. The helicopter thundered above the soccer field, its blades chopping the air into furious bursts that rattled windows of nearby houses and sent dust flying in every direction. Parents shielded their children, squinting against the storm of grass and grit. The game had stopped completely. No ball, no whistle, no cheering, just the deafening roar of the Navy machine hovering above. Then it happened. A thick rope slid down from the side of the helicopter, whipping violently in the wind. The crowd gasped as it swung back and forth, heavy and deliberate. It wasn't like the ropes in a playground or some simple cord. It was thick, braided, and built for men trained to climb in seconds. It wasn't here for show. The parents who had been laughing earlier now pressed their children closer, their smiles gone. The kids who had mocked the boy for his strange dad now sat frozen, eyes wide, mouths open. The laughter was gone. In its place was fear, awe, and disbelief. The boy stared at the rope as if it were alive, his chest pounding so hard he could barely breathe. He had never seen anything like this before, except in movies. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. The Navy helicopter wasn't passing by. It was here, right above the soccer field, lowering a rope for his father. The soldier who had slid down earlier tightened his stance, his boots firm in the dirt. He turned toward the dad, his face serious, his voice cutting through the noise like a command drilled into him 100 times before. "Commander, time to move." The crowd erupted in whispers and gasps. Parents shouted questions over the noise, their voices trembling. "Commander? Did he say commander? No, that can't be right. He's just some random dad. We saw him sitting there before the game." But the soldier's words left no doubt. They weren't a joke. They weren't a mistake. The man they had mocked only minutes ago was someone far more important than they had ever imagined. The dad gave a small nod, his face calm. He didn't look proud or smug. He didn't look like he wanted revenge for the laughter. He simply accepted the moment, as though this had been expected all along. The soldier reached into a pouch and pulled something out. A black folder, stamped with the unmistakable Navy insignia. He handed it to the dad with both hands, his posture sharp and respectful. The dad took it and slid it under his arm without hesitation. Then the soldier pulled out a pair of dark sunglasses. He held them out, and the dad took them, sliding them on slowly. The crowd murmured again, their disbelief growing. The transformation was simple but powerful. A moment ago, he had looked like just another man in worn boots and a plain shirt. Now, with the folder under his arm, the sunglasses over his eyes, and the Navy helicopter roaring above, he looked like someone untouchable. Someone who didn't just belong on that field, he belonged above it. The boy's throat tightened. His father looked taller, stronger, more distant now. But then, his father turned, and for just a moment, their eyes met again through the dark lenses. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. It wasn't big. It wasn't obvious. But it was enough. The boy knew he was still dad. The soldier pointed to the rope. His voice boomed again. "Commander, we're short on time. Mission protocol says we need to leave immediately." Gasps rippled across the benches. A mission. A real Navy mission. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't an exercise. Something was happening. Something serious enough that the Navy had come straight into a civilian soccer game to collect this man. The coach who had tried to remove the dad earlier now stood pale and silent. His whistle dangled uselessly from his neck, his lips pressed together tightly. He couldn't even look at the man he had mocked. Shame burned in his chest. He had laughed with everyone else. Now he wanted to vanish into the ground. The dad finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady, carrying over the chaos. Understood. He turned toward his son. The boy had stepped closer now, his small body bracing against the wind. His hair whipped around his face, his shirt tugging like it wanted to fly away. The boy's eyes were full of questions, full of fear, but also something else, pride. The dad knelt briefly, lowering himself to his son's level. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, firm and warm despite the storm around them. His voice softened, meant only for him. Be strong. I'll be back. You hear me? The boy swallowed hard, nodding quickly, tears burning his eyes. He wanted to say something. Don't go. Stay here. Why now? But his words stuck in his throat. All he could do was cling to his father's hand, unwilling to let go. The soldier stepped closer, placing a hand gently on the boy's back. His voice, though rough, carried a note of kindness. Your father's needed. He's the best. Don't worry, kid. He knows what he's doing. The boy's grip loosened, slowly, reluctantly. His father stood tall again, towering against the storm. He took one last look at the crowd. They were silent now, their mocking smiles replaced by wide eyes and hanging jaws. Some looked ashamed, some scared, some simply stunned. Without another word, the dad stepped to the rope. He gripped it with steady hands, his movements practiced sure. Then, with a powerful pull, he lifted himself off the ground. The crowd gasped. Dust swirled wildly around him as he climbed, hand over hand, rising higher and higher into the roar of the helicopter. The rope swayed in the wind, but his body moved with perfect control. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stumble. He looked like he belonged there. The soldier followed right behind him, climbing quickly, his boots leaving the ground as the rope swung higher. The boy tilted his head back, his eyes locked on his father's figure as it disappeared into the belly of the machine above. His chest ached, but deep inside, pride filled the space where fear had lived. His dad wasn't ordinary. He never had been. And now everyone else finally knew it too. The rope jerked upward, pulled back into the helicopter. The wind howled. The machine rose higher, its shadow lifting from the field. And on the ground, the people who had laughed minutes before now stood silent, their faces pale, their hearts pounding. Because they understood the truth. This wasn't just a dad. This was a commander. And he had just been called back to duty. The helicopter pulled away from the soccer field, its roar fading into the clouds. Dust settled back onto the grass, leaving behind silence. Thick, heavy silence. For the first time since the game began, no one spoke. No one laughed. No one even moved. The boy stood in the middle of the field, his hair still messy from the storm of wind, his chest rising and falling quickly. He stared at the sky long after the helicopter had vanished. His father's last words echoed inside him. Be strong. I'll be back. But the field around him was no longer the same. The parents on the benches, the kids who had once laughed, the coach who had shouted, all of them were different now. They no longer looked at him with smirks or whispers. They looked at him with something else. Guilt, fear, and curiosity. Finally, one of the parents broke the silence. What just happened? Another parent answered, her voice trembling. That wasn't just some dad. That was a Navy commander. A real one. The coach stepped forward, his face pale. His whistle still hung around his neck, but he didn't dare touch it. He looked at the boy with eyes full of regret. Son, he said carefully, why didn't you tell us who your father was? The boy turned his head slowly, his small hands clenched into fists. His voice cracked but carried across the quiet field. You never asked. You just laughed. The words struck like stones. The parents shifted uncomfortably, their shame growing deeper. Some avoided the boy's eyes completely, staring instead at the ground. Others whispered among themselves, trying to piece together what they had seen. One of the kids, the same one who had mocked earlier, stepped closer. His face had lost its arrogance.
His voice was soft now.
Is your dad really in the Navy? The boy nodded once, his eyes still locked on the sky. He's not just in the Navy. He commands them. When they need him, they come. No matter where he is. The kid's jaw dropped. He didn't know what to say. The boy's words carried a weight too heavy for him to argue with. Then, suddenly, the sound of approaching cars broke the silence. Black vehicles with tinted windows rolled up along the edge of the field. Their engines purred quietly, but the message they sent was loud. Men in uniform stepped out, their boots clicking against the pavement. They moved quickly, scanning the area as if the soccer field itself was a target. Gasps filled the benches again. Parents grabbed their children and pulled them closer. Whispers rose. Who are they? Is this more Navy? What's happening? One of the men, tall and sharp, approached the boy. He wore a dark uniform with medals across his chest. His face was firm, unreadable, but when he looked down at the boy, his tone softened just a little. You're his son, aren't you? The boy nodded, his throat tight. Yes, sir. The man crouched to meet his eyes. Your father is an important man, one of the best we have. Right now, he's been called to something urgent. I can't tell you the details, but what you saw today, you'll understand one day. The boy bit his lip, his hands trembling. Will he be okay? The man's expression softened for the first time. He placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Your father doesn't fail. If anyone can come back, it's him. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded quickly. He wanted to believe those words.
He needed to.
The man stood and looked at the stunned parents and children who still sat frozen on the benches. His voice turned cold, commanding. What happened here today stays here. Do you understand? You saw nothing. You say nothing. For the safety of everyone involved. The crowd nodded quickly, some mumbling agreements. No one dared argue. The men in uniform returned to their vehicles, but one stayed behind a moment longer, watching the boy. Then he gave a slight nod of respect before climbing into the car. The engines roared to life, and just like that, the vehicles were gone, leaving another heavy silence on the field. The game was over. No one even tried to restart it. Slowly, the parents began gathering their things, their movements awkward, unsure. A few of them looked at the boy as if wanting to speak, but shame stopped them. How could they explain away the laughter, the mockery, when the truth had been revealed so harshly? The boy sat down on the grass, his small hands gripping his knees. He felt alone, even with everyone around him. But deep inside, beneath the fear, something else burned, a spark of pride. His father wasn't just any man. He was a commander, someone the Navy relied on, someone strong enough to change how an entire crowd saw him in an instant. And now, the boy knew something the others didn't. This wasn't the first time his father had been called away. It wouldn't be the last. Every time he left, the world held its breath. The boy whispered to himself, so quietly only he could hear. Come back, Dad. Please come back. Above him, the sky stretched wide and endless, hiding secrets he was only beginning to understand. Somewhere up there in that vast sky, his father was already on a mission. And the world, though it didn't know it, was depending on him. The laughter was gone. The doubt was gone. Only the truth remained. The dad was not just a man on the field. He was a protector. And now, everyone knew it.